All right, so just to introduce this, I am Gretchen Morgan, and I have the pleasure of being joined today by Penny Christian, and we are going to talk about a couple of the parts of the 4.0 prototype ideas that we've been working on with the department as a Cool Counsel, and we're going to model for you what it might look like for you to have a conversation with a family member using the family member protocol that we created. Penny and I are just going to visit about a couple of components, and you are invited to do the same. You can talk about just a couple of things, or if you have somebody who's really dedicated and you want to talk about all the things, there are things here in this tool to support you with all the things if that's what you want to do. But we're not going to do all the things. We're just going to do a couple of things. So Penny, you and I talked, and we're going to start where you have some interest. We're going to go into the VLE indicators. So
Okay.
I'm going to practice doing this with you just like somebody from the Cool Council could do. I'm going to choose option A through the protocol, which is I'm just going to say to you what these things are basically about using the notes here rather than play the videos for you because Cool Council members can play the videos themselves if they want to do that. But everyone should know there are a number of videos to help you with certain topics through here, and those are available in the protocol. All right. With that preface in mind, Penny, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So the sort of quick background just provided in the protocol here is that we have this moonshot. The Cool Council and the department have been working together for almost 2 years now, actually. And we have this moonshot. We want to build a prosperous Kentucky. We think to build a prosperous Kentucky, we will launch an accountability system that's meaningful and useful to all our learners. And we have been working on that for a couple of years, and we are now in the study phase, which means we have some ideas that have emerged, and we've been testing those with people and getting feedback and refining those ideas. We're really trying to study what would it mean? What would it mean for the department to have to implement these things? They're doing some work right now, trying to figure out like how would we actually pull off this stuff technically and whatever. And we're asking folks like you, what would it mean for you if we implemented this? So with that in mind, I'm going to share with you about the vibrant learning experience indicators. And there's two ideas about this. And the first one is about percent of students. So we've been using the term vibrant learning experiences. I just said learning experiences. Learning experiences. And we defined it this way, and this has been collaboratively built by members of the Cool Council. In partnership with families, communities, students are agents of their own learning, engaged in relevant, authentic, and joyful learning experiences. Vibrant learning honors students' cultural wealth, gifts, and interests. Vibrant learning culminates in the application of knowledge and skills demonstrated through personalized products. And we know that right now in Kentucky, there's already a lot of this going on, and we see evidence of it in things like student capstones, student-led conferences, service learning experiences, work-based learning experiences, student defenses of learning, independent studies, sometimes students doing things in dual enrollment and college enrollment courses that are aligned to this kind of view of vibrant learning. The idea of this measure is just that as we begin to emphasize this as a state, as a whole commonwealth, we would identify with some group of educators from around the state a set of like experiences that we know are VLE experiences. And we would ask schools just to track and report what percent of students are getting access to those experiences in a given school year. So that's the idea. First, before I ask you what you think about that, do you have any questions about that? Does that idea make sense?
It does. And when you talk about the percent of students and that word access
Mm-hmm.
matters, right? So a vibrant learning experience for is it just say for dual credit, kids who are in dual credit courses, or do other kids in the building have access
Mm-hmm.
and to those opportunities? So yeah, I'd be really curious to see. And I like
Mm-hmm.
that you put the access part in.
Mm-hmm. Great. Is there anything about adding this to accountability that you think would be helpful or harmful as you think about families in particular, but you're also welcome to think about students because obviously you're very connected to them.
My only concern would be how will this be measured? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say it becomes an indicator. Vibrant learning experiences, we can't just base it on the number of kids who are exposed to it, right? Because we don't know, they may have had a great experience and it was fun and they had a finished product. But what did they master? Did they master? And how do we
Mm-hmm.
measure that that was the case?
So this indicator right now, this look at vibrant learning experiences would not do a good job of answering that question for you because it really is just about like what percent of kids are accessing these experiences. It doesn't have
Right.
a way to tell us qualitative information about them. There's
Right.
another option coming up, which we're going to talk about in just a minute,
Excellent.
that would give
Okay.
us better information about that. But I think it's great you raised that. It's good to know that that's something you would really value. Like it's great to know the number, but you would also really like to know more as a family
Mhm.
member. When you think about families who have students for whom school is harder in some way, right? Maybe they are students with learning disabilities. Maybe they are, marginalized in some way. Maybe they have experienced historical, inequities in our education system. Do you think this measure has any unique potential to be extra helpful to them, right? The kids that maybe we don't serve as well as we ought to right now.
That's a wonderful question. And that's the question I have for it, right? What's the value?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times the vibrant learning experiences that you see are in small groups or in little pockets of a school or pockets of a district.
Mm-hmm.
So the question would be, what are you basing these vibrant learning experiences on, right? Traditionally, is there research to indicate that these experiences actually do reach those marginalized groups?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
if we access it properly and we measure it properly, then I think so.
It sounds like also you might be interested in pairing demographic data with the participation data in some way to know that, let's say 85% of students participated in a vibrant learning experience. That sounds awesome.
Hmm.
Except that's less awesome if the 15% who didn't are all English language learners.
Correct.
Then that's not so awesome. So you'd
Hmm.
want to have some
Right.
demographic data paired with that percent participation data to give you a full picture of whether this is really encouraging schools to make
Yes,
these
ma'am.
things accessible to all students.
Absolutely.
That makes a lot of sense to me, Penny. Anything else you want to say about that one, or shall I go on to the other vibrant learning experience measure?
No, go ahead. Continue.
Okay. So the other idea for vibrant learning experiences is to use an accreditation-like process related to vibrant learning experiences, which is cool because it might give us more data, like some of the things you described. I'll explain that in a minute. But also it's a way for us to learn about accreditation-like measures and see if we like those in our accountability system. So here's what we have to say about this particular one. I'm not going to repeat the definition of vibrant learning experiences for you, but that's here in the protocol if I felt I needed to, because we hadn't talked about it before, but we have. So
Hmm.
this idea this time is, instead of just reporting the percent of students participating and accessing these experiences, it's that there would be a group of educators to work with KDE to identify quality criteria that would be used to evaluate how far a school has come in its efforts to provide a particular type of vibrant learning experience. So, for example, they might describe what it looks like when you first begin to have student-led conferences, and then describe how a school would expect conferences to get deeper and more rigorous over time. With those criteria, teams of colleagues would come and they would visit a school. They would visit one another and they would give really accurate feedback to them about how well they're currently implementing one or more type of vibrant learning experiences. Again, student-led conference is just an example. And then in the accountability framework, points would be given, right? This would become like an indicator. And therefore points would be given for like the different levels of implementation identified in that accreditation-like visit and review. And that would be included in the reporting to the state. So
Okay.
if you have any questions about that, how it would work, and then I'll ask you a similar kind of questions about what you think the impact might be.
Yeah, well, you've addressed a few of the things, and I heard you use the word rigorous,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of times VLE is not rigorous,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't replace rigor with fun.
Right.
So yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So the idea is there would be some group of educators that would work with the state to create those criteria that would describe, like a sort of, if you were designing this for a kid in a classroom, it'd be like a learning progression, right? Of like, what does it look like
Yes,
when you start to do this? And then what does it look like
right.
when you get better at it? And then what does it look like when you're awesome at it? And so it would demonstrate a change in rigor and quality as they get better and better, so that
Okay,
hopefully the school gets some useful feedback to help them get better at that vibrant learning experience. But also there's some points given for the depth and quality of their work
nice.
in
Okay.
the accountability report. All right. So if you think about that, is there anything about that if we added this to accountability, is there anything about that you think would be particularly helpful or useful to parents? Or again, you're really close to students. If you want to speak to parents and students both, things about this that might be helpful, things about this that might be harmful.
I think it will be helpful to kids, for students, especially when a lot of times you have kids who don't necessarily, first of all, they may not always understand that you can be both rigorous
Mm-hmm.
and still have that fun component that we keep talking about, and having it be meaningful to the students.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it holds them accountable on a level that they would appreciate, even if they don't appreciate it at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the advantage for students. And for families, I think it gives us a little bit more insight into this desire to expect more
Mhm.
from the kids, right?
Mhm.
So I would appreciate that.
So if you were a parent and you saw a sort of score for your kid's school that said, they're doing student-led conferences, that's a vibrant learning experience they've invested in, and they're currently at this level of implementation, which means it's this level
Hmm.
of quality right now. For you as a parent, that would be helpful because it would tell you something more about, I'm trying to say back to you what I think you're saying. I think you're saying that would tell you something more about the quality of your kid's experience
Yes,
than maybe
absolutely.
you would know otherwise.
Hmm.
Um, so same question I asked you before about sort of folks for whom school is harder for some way, right? Maybe they're identified with special needs and they have an IEP. Maybe they're a second language learner. Maybe
Hmm.
they're, dealing with issues related to poverty or socioeconomic access, racial discrimination. These things all make school harder for all kinds of folks. If
Yeah.
you think about those kinds of folks in schools, those kids in those families, is there anything about this indicator that you think would be especially good and helpful for them?
So my youngest, who just graduated last year, um, she had a 504 for migraines and then later on for anxiety.
Mhm.
And what I appreciated, she went to schools where they valued it. They valued her voice, my voice, and they understood what
Mhm.
accommodations meant.
Yeah.
So if I'm a parent who has those types of concerns, I don't know that my kid would have stood up
Mm.
and presented, right? But
Hmm.
what I'm hearing is there's some flexibility in how that final project is done.
Hmm.
So I think if you do it right, and I think if teachers are aware that every kid can have that final project, but every kid is not going to sit before
Mm.
a panel of three teachers or three parents and do that. Mine never would have presented publicly. She wouldn't have. She would have frozen. It would have been bad. But I think the opportunity, again, we talk about access. I think
Mhm.
modifying it and differentiation of
Mhm.
education is important, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I think yeah.
So I think one thing I hear from you, Penny, is you're suggesting some quality criteria, when they're establishing these criteria for what's a good VLE practice. One of them is you've really thought about the whole range of learners that you have, and you're
Hmm.
allowing for some flexibility
Yeah,
and some responsiveness to kids where they are while still having, high expectations about like the
expected.
foundations of learning are important. Going to
Absolutely.
modify and support you in different ways, that actually should be a quality criteria we look for. That's part of the school having a high quality, vibrant learning
Hmm.
experience is that ability to
Yeah,
accommodate.
absolutely. Yep.
Great. All right. Well, Penny, I think we're going to pause here. I think we've offered a great example. Thanks so much for taking the time to do this. Your responses are really thoughtful, and I think a good model of what we're likely to hear from families about this, which are things that can really help us with our design. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this with me today.
Yes, ma'am.